The Columbus Metropolitan Club was founded in 1976 by 13 women leaders who wanted to be included in the community conversation. I am Sally Bloomfield, and I was one of those 13 women. Having been left out of men's clubs that focused on community issues, it was a priority for us to make the club 100% inclusive.
Today, CMC presents public policy forums every Wednesday at lunch with average attendance of more than 200 people. I'm Tony Bell, and I frequently attend forums, which are open to everyone and present relevant, current, and newsworthy topics. I'm grateful that CMC is nonpartisan and presents many perspectives on every topic.
I'm Jane Scott, President and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC is open to everyone. We invite you to explore the personal and professional benefits awaiting you at the Metropolitan Club. Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
So much of that. Give me 1 second. I got to say hi to Stephanie Kunze.
All right, hello. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. 3-minute lunch, right? Did you get it in? No, thank you so much. We're so happy to see you all here today. We're so happy to have this room full. It's great to be back together again. As you can tell, we can't stop chatting with each other because we're so happy to be together again. All right, so welcome and thank you. CMC was founded in 1976 by 13 visionary women who set CMC's mission, which is to connect people and ideas through community conversation. And that's exactly what we're here for today. From its very beginning, CMC has welcomed everyone. I'm Carrie Schmidt, managing partner with Plentiful and a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. And let's begin by welcoming our newest CMC members. And I hope I get these all right, so we'll hang in there with me, team. All right, Lori Barber, Mental Health America. Todd Bowen, Ohio Restaurant Association. Jason Brocious, Central Ohio Lions I Bank. Rhea DeBussy, Mariva Page, and Nick Saltzman from Equitas Health. James Eloff, McKesson Corporation. Christine Flaherty, HER Realtors. Melissa Linville, Columbus Legal Aid Society, Jordan Nishizaki, Diverse Network, Stephen Shireholt, State of Ohio, Susan Chematsky and Ron Ugarski, Doug Wolf, Boys and Girls Club of Central Ohio, and Lucia Wolchinses in Ohio. Welcome and thank you for joining. And if you're not already a member, as Jane said, we would love to have you, so please consider joining. Please do take a moment to look at the back of your forum flyers. You'll see the organizations that provide nonprofit Columbus Metropolitan Club with half of its annual revenue. To join this list of generous sponsors, please see Jane Scott or Lainey Cuthbert with CMC. Speaking of sponsors, we'd like to say thank you to today's sponsors for this forum: Columbia Gas, Columbus Business First, the Columbus Foundation, Columbus Speech and Hearing Center, Kramer and Associates, the Crane Group, Huntington, Ohio State University, and Schneider Downs. Today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. And let's thank those all for supporting today's forum. Central Ohio nonprofits have battled back from the pandemic only to be met with new challenges, including the steepest inflation in decades. Rising prices and labor costs have made it difficult for many nonprofits to deliver services to those in need. Nonprofit leaders have also seen some COVID relief funds come to an end, while the demand for services only continues to increase. Today, we'll examine the current state of Central Ohio nonprofits with an expert panel. On behalf of today's sponsor, Columbia Gas, please welcome Ellen Mackey, Director of Government and Public Affairs with Columbia Gas, to introduce today's panel.
Thank you, Carrie. Columbia Gas and the NiSource Charitable Foundation are extremely proud to sponsor today's nonprofit forum. I look around and I see so many community partners in the room. Thank you for all you do to make our community stronger and more equitable for all. At Columbia Gas, we know that poverty is complicated, and we understand the intersections that exist between public utilities and basic needs. Through the NiSource Charitable Foundation, we work hard to ensure that our customers' basic needs are met and that we facilitate economic and workforce development opportunities, ensuring that our customers can provide for their families. We also invest in sustainable environmental practices, and we support initiatives that keep our customers, employees, and communities safe. We envision a community where all members have what they need to thrive, and we're grateful for all of you here today working so hard to make that vision a reality. And now I'm honored to welcome and introduce the panelists for today's forum. Michael Corey, Executive Director of the Human Service Chamber of Franklin County. Dr. Lisa Courtice, President and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio. Leah Evans, President and CEO of Homeport. Dan Sharpe, Vice President for Community Research and Grants Management with the Columbus Foundation. And our host, Deborah Aubert, Thomas, President and CEO of Philanthropy, Ohio. You can learn more about today's speakers in your forum flyers. Deborah, we look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Ellen, and good afternoon, everyone. I am so appreciative of this panel with their varied experience, ranging from, they really build out the concentric circles of the nonprofit ecosystem, ranging from varied human services, ending poverty, neighborhood revitalization, and also philanthropy. So we think about the center of those concentric circles, right? Our community members, the people that we all serve. We know that our region has been experiencing tremendous growth, but we know that with that growth, there's increased need for human services. So Michael, I know that the Human Services Chamber just completed a State of the Sector study. So I'd love to invite you to kick us off by sharing with you, what did you hear from that study? What did organizations say are the biggest challenges facing the individuals, the families, and the communities?
Well, thank you, Deborah. I look forward to talking about that for the next hour. I'm a recovering lawyer, so I will do my best to be succinct. Before I begin, first let me thank all of you for being here. There are a lot of really, really good people in this room, and the fact that there are so many here for this conversation is what gives us hope in the health and human services sector. There are extraordinary challenges, as we'll talk through, and we will only get through them because of the people in this room, the people that are paying attention online. Second, I want to acknowledge how fortunate we are to be here, eating indoors with the power on, with cool air coming through, and pretty decent air quality. Good job with the HVAC, CMC. That's become a big part of my job, is mitigating COVID risk, and you're doing an excellent job with the indoor air here today. There are a lot of folks right now that are dealing with record heat, and a lot of our agencies and people in the community are navigating that public health crisis right now. And I know a lot of us will get back to work doing that when we leave, and many of us don't have power to workplaces. So I'm glad that we can all be together to have this conversation, get back to work, because there is indeed so much to do. Third, while I keep procrastinating here, I want to acknowledge everyone that works in the nonprofit sector that's here today, and appreciate all of you, among my 16,000 bosses at the Human Service Chamber. Thanks to each of you and your teams and all that you do in our community. And lastly, I want to thank our elected officials that have made time out of their very busy schedule to be here. If the elected officials would please raise their hands so we can acknowledge you today. Thank you for that. Okay, so in the month of May, we put out yet another survey to our 150 health and human services nonprofits and asked them how it was going. Because, as you know, there are lots of billowing challenges, and we wanted to get a sense of how folks were navigating everything after a very long 26 months and counting. And I wanted to share a few top-line items from that. You can go to our website, humanservicechamber.org, and look at this document, which I had intended to print for you and have for you, but our power was out, so I couldn't get it for you this morning. And we'll release the full report this Friday at 3 p.m. on the web, and I look forward to all of you getting to see that. First, we asked them what the biggest challenges were that they were facing right now. The key ones will not stun you. The first is actually managing growth. A lot of organizations have been fortunate to be supported financially over the last 2 years to meet the significant need that has arisen. But a lot of them are having a hard time navigating that for various reasons. And these are all intertwined, as you'll see, a key one being they need more people to do the work. The second significant challenge is financial unpredictability. Even though a lot of organizations are navigating things all right now financially, and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel for 2022, there's a lot of concerns about what comes next and what comes after American Rescue Plan dollars dry up, and what comes next after there are transitions in government and transitions in priorities amongst people that have been giving to the sector, and so on and so forth. That's a significant concern. The third significant challenge is workforce, as I teased out. Recruiting and retaining the right talent and holding on to it and getting the work done. It's proving to be very, very difficult, and has been for at least a year, and it's only getting worse right now. We need more people. Fourth is client needs. We're seeing a resurgence of client needs in many subsectors of the health and human services sector that are even greater than the first months of the pandemic. And there are fewer people available to do the work to meet that greater need. And folks are exhausted, as I'm sure we all are to varying degrees. It's a little harder for the health and human services folks doing that work. And then lastly, technology. Technology is a significant challenge for our folks. The second piece that I wanted to share and tease out to give you a sense of that workforce challenge. So we had 89 agencies respond to this survey, and they collectively employ about 15,500 people. At those 89 agencies, they reported 1,943 unfilled jobs. The next piece is workforce impediments. What are the top workforce impediments to keeping and to recruiting that talent? The biggest by far is wages and benefits. That's one of the areas where the nonprofit sector is at a unique competitive disadvantage. Second is finding qualified staff. Third is burnout. Fourth is recruitment, just challenges finding those people. Next is workload. Everyone in here that works at a nonprofit wears at least 5 hats. And last is retention, again, for a lot of the reasons already mentioned. The next piece I wanted to highlight is about the demand in the sector and for the services that the sector is providing. We asked our members, how does your demand on services compare to where it did in February of 2020, before the world got knocked off its axis? 2 of our agencies have actually had the demand decrease, and that's been because COVID has made their business model harder to complete. 10 are operating at about the same demand that they're trying to fill. 77 are trying to meet greater needs than they were in February 2020. A year ago, before Delta had emerged, I testified to the county commissioners, and I promise I'll go fast after this, about the state of things. And we said, we're not sure if we're in the eye of the hurricane or in the edge of it. And we were obviously in the eye of the hurricane. The challenge now, as we move into this endemic mode, hopefully with COVID, is to belabor the hurricane metaphor. After a hurricane, the storm surge goes back to where the shoreline was previously. The storm surge isn't going to recede after this. The need is going to remain very, very high for a long time. And then lastly, we asked our agencies, do you anticipate having enough revenue to meet the needs of your clients after 2022? And 49% of our members said no. Or hopefully, or we hope so. And I wanted to share one quote that was offered with that. We need to rethink funding for the sector. We need reliable and consistent funding aligned with the data we continue to share. So I know I meandered along there, but I wanted to give you a sense of how challenging it is. But I also wanted to note a recurring theme of all of the responses that we got and of all the conversations that we have with our members is that there is tremendous hope and energy to do this work. It is endlessly inspiring to me to hear our folks talk about how much they believe they can actually navigate all of these challenges, but they need help helping so many in our community.
Thank you, Michael. And if I can have our other panelists also share a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing in communities. I know at Philanthropy Ohio, our health initiative met a couple of weeks ago, and the top challenges that were raised were on mental health. And so we think about, trauma and safety and all of the things. What are you seeing in communities?
Well, Michael did a great job of providing a summary. So I concur, and I think my colleagues at United Way would concur with Michael's findings. That's what we're hearing. It has been an interesting time in my career where I've always spent my energies concerned about people in need in our community, and the pandemic required that we think about people serving people in a different way. And then there's just this deep concern for the trauma that people on the front lines, brave people on the front lines, committed people on the front lines were facing. And that, I think, is very different. So the mental health aspect, and I'd be interested, Michael, at some point to learn about what you learned about mental health of our colleagues from your survey.
I would just add also that as we think about the challenges that we face, one that's continually coming up with our peers is about the agility to be able to change and shift and move in new spaces. The idea that, yes, the need is continuing to grow, but we also at the same time have to serve it in a different way. And Michael noted that the digital piece and that technology and that savviness you have to be able to serve clients physically in person and now not in person with the same level and intentionality of service. And that's been a new frontier and a new challenge for us as we've entered into that space. And then the other piece of it that we know is about the intersections that we're like you're talking about. For us and what we do, we can provide a house, but that's not going to necessarily get you more income. That's not necessarily going to fix where your child's going to school. That's not necessarily going to address the food insecurity. So it's all of the intersections and layers, and that poverty is so complex that it's not one thing or one lever to be able to be pulled. And so as we work with our peers, we're always trying to find that next innovative partnership that takes the work further and actually address the systemic issues that our residents and our clients are dealing with.
I think the intensity of the work within the nonprofit sector is being met with such heart, and that is so inspiring. And the generosity of donors that are responding to your needs is equally as inspiring. And donors understand it. And whether it's through headlines that might jar them into perspective, or whether it's a long-term, in-depth relationship with your organization, we're seeing donors digging deeper and giving more. And some of that comes truly at the hand of, yes, data-informed philanthropy, but also being in relationship with you and having an understanding about how things are going. If the newsletter is still purporting rainbows and unicorns and greatness, and you're fulfilling your mission, that's going to work to some degree. But for donors to truly understand where your pain points are and what your struggles are, you may find that they are really interested in that real talk and want to be a real partner in that work. We often think of philanthropy as reward capital and risk capital. And I think if that's a new perspective for you, indeed, think about it. You should be rewarded for the good work that you're doing. And you should also be able to enjoy philanthropic engagements to take on risk, to be your best selves as unfilled positions, best selves as organizations. And I know that many of you do lean into that mantra, and that's what's allowed you to weather much of this storm and chart your course forward.
Thank you. We know that across industries, workforce challenges and changes abound. And Michael, you lifted up some of what you've heard from nonprofits in terms of their challenges. And Leah, you lifted up a little bit around, being creative in your delivery. What are you seeing? How are organizations reimagining their work and their delivery as they think about workforce issues?
So one thing I think I'm going to come back to that, and I'm not going to promise to be succinct like Michael did. I'm going to come to Dan real quick because I think you were sharing that there's a level of vulnerability that we need to show. At the same time, we've been taught and instructed to show a level of strength and resiliency. So it's like, oh no, I got this, but okay, I'm also really struggling in this area. And as organizations, how do we position ourselves to be able to talk to both, right? To be able to say we have the sustainability, we have the business model, we have the strength that lets us go on. And for us, that's 35 years strong. But at the same time, here's an area, and sharing that back with our funders, here's an area where we're really struggling, where we need help, where we need support. And I think that's, sometimes hard to be able to share both messages. And so thank you for calling that vulnerability out that we need to bring forward in the work. And so if I flip that back to Deborah, and your question, I think that is part of, I can, honestly say that we have, for example, we had never delivered our home buyer education classes in a virtual format. Now that's all people want to do, right? Is to come to our, go through Eventbrite, sign up, come on Zoom, get the class, not have to worry about childcare, not have to worry about coming to our location. That was completely new for us. And we had to actually go to HUD and get approval for that and work through a process to have the compliance. So I think sometimes there's definitely barriers to us trying those new things in our space. Honestly, I was talking to some of my peers about it's risk. We're risk adverse, because we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about people's sustainability. So I don't want to do anything that's gonna fail, right? Like I don't want to go out and try a program or try an initiative that's not gonna have impact. But some of that is a rethinking about that, and that maybe we can try something and pilot it and see if it works. And maybe it doesn't have the huge success, but we learned from it. So bringing some of that agile risk-taking thinking into our work so that we can advance the delivery of those services is new for us. I can say as an organization, but we've seen the reward on the other side. So how do we keep doing that and still hold the gravitas that these are, people's lives and situations that we're piloting a program with, and be able to parry in both.
I would also add that I hear our nonprofit leaders saying we can't meet the need because we don't have the staff. Well, then reduce your organization, reduce your staff. Like let's how can you reimagine what your organization looks like? I believe in our system. I believe that the people that you're unable to serve because you don't have the staff will find the services in our community, and to make some bold and brave decisions about how you reimagine your organization. And that might mean you look really different, but to continue to say we can't do this or we're doing it poorly is not a good option. And oh, by the way, I was pole vaulting recently and hurt my neck and had surgery. It's actually called wear and tear, but I did have surgery. Right?
I wasn't sure where that was going.
Yes. It's like pole vaulting
out there.
Nonprofit business is like not pole vaulting. I don't know if that was just going to have a parallel there.
I thought there was a whiplash joke or something.
Right. No joke.
So we see our members trying all sorts of traditional and creative things to attract and retain talent. Several organizations are contemplating 4-day work weeks now and finding a way to make that work within their business model and to keep their funding streams open. Some organizations are providing benefits that they've never offered before. We have at least one member that's offering pet insurance now and has delighted a lot of organizations. We have many that have been exploring paid family leave in a way that they have not in previous years. Many, of course, offering bonuses or elevating wages as much as they can as well. We even have a number of unique team building events that get away from the traditional, let's have a happy hour, et cetera. There's a grassroots effort right now to create a summer sports league within the health and human services sector to try and build some camaraderie and happiness. And for our part, we've been trying all sorts of things to support these CEOs doing this work. Next month, for example, we reached out to Harvard Business School and we said, they have a significant project on the future of work. And we said, can you come talk to 150 nonprofit CEOs about how they can navigate this workforce crunch and challenge and help them make adjustments? And we're very excited about what we'll learn from that and what differences that will make in the community as well.
Thank you. I know we've also seen a sea of changes in leadership in organizations. And if you think about the succession planning that needs to happen and the opportunity to attract new talent in, what are you seeing or what are you concerned about in that space?
Your concern is institutional knowledge, the depth of relationships, and some of these transitions are intentionally planned for, and other organizations and boards find themselves at the nexus of a rapid decision that needs to be made in the interest of the organization's mission and doesn't allow for as planful of transitions. Our community is becoming better because people are moving into our community and taking some of these jobs that we're filling, some of these jobs that we're talking about, and being placed and bringing their expertise from other markets, and we as a community are better for that. So I think that the succession planning and transition, I want to look at it from a position of strength and excitement for what it means for new ideas, new relationships, but it too needs to be some real talk about what it does mean to transition an organization and the staff culture that comes with that. New relationships with donors or retaining those relationships. And so if an organization is not planning for a thoughtful and intentional succession, I would certainly encourage you to do so. And also on the flip side, what is the crisis management plan for when a decision needs to be made swiftly? Because really those are two of the highest likelihood scenarios to play out, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be prepared for those.
I think on the flip side, I'm concerned because we have seen some leaders, really talented leaders, who have chosen to leave the sector because the work is really hard and it's not getting any easier, and the funding is not there to make the work as successful as it needs to be. And so how do we continue to attract the talent that we want in our sector if the work is so grueling and we don't have the resources needed?
Lisa, that is a great segue to start talking a little bit more about funding and the resources that nonprofits need. And you think about, a leader having resources, but that are tied to specific things that they must do, and they don't have the flexibility. I know there are many funders starting to lean into a new concept called trust-based philanthropy. Inherent in trust-based philanthropy are leading with trust, centering relationships, collaborating with humility and curiosity, redistributing power, and working for systemic equity. And this can include giving multi-year unrestricted funding so that nonprofits have the flexibility to access and determine where grant dollars are most needed, and allows for innovation, emergent action, and sustainability. It also includes streamlining proposals and reporting requirements, and really building those relationships that push past gravitating towards the people, the usual suspects, the folks that are comfortable with, the folks that they know. But also open, honest, and transparent communication, supporting relationships that are rooted in trust and mutual accountability. And I think that gets back to what you all were sharing about, if you have trust between a funder and a nonprofit, you can share what your challenges are. You're not always painting the rosy picture. So how are nonprofits navigating the changing relationships that they're seeing with funders and with donors?
We're good?
You want me to- Okay. Absolutely. And Deborah, thank you for giving the primer on trust-based philanthropy. The field as a whole, thankfully, is making grand shifts towards that tenet, that philosophy, and the Columbus Foundation led all last year an important process that we announced at the beginning of this calendar year. And many of you have noticed drastic changes to our application process. Our final report as well is intended to be as succinct as possible to see you as the experts that you are and tell us how it went. And because if there's a surprise at that point, we probably have already heard about it from you because we are more in relationship with you and conversation about the work that you're doing. But absolutely within our wholesale change of our entire grant making process is a drastic emphasis on operating support. And so while through an application process that will yield general operating support, unrestricted support for your organization, it's also an important point of education to our donors that overhead is not a bad word. Operating support is a necessity to keep the organizations around that they care about. And beyond that, we have a much increased investment in capacity building to ensure that organizations have the opportunity to strengthen the backbone to help you carry out your mission, full stop, but also to ensure that our donors have a high level of confidence in their charitable investments with you. And the third pillar of the shift is a focus on racial equity. And for us, that really looks like the intersections of gender, class, and environment, knowing that gender has increased disproportionality for nonprofit organizations and who you serve, small business leaders, and environmental barriers in our community as well are disproportionate when you look at our communities of color. And so in that entire redesign of grant making, we also took on our lending arm and redesigned that. Program-related investment is the term really in philanthropy for a low interest rate loan. And we have a commitment of a $5 million pool specifically for equitable small businesses, so minority business enterprises. And so that intersectionality and racial equity focused on class is very intentional for us because we want it to be about access to opportunity, upward mobility. And whatever that American dream looks like, we want people to be able to pursue it. And we want to be able to use a loan to help organizations get there, or we want to be able to deploy charitable capital through our application process. And then the interwoven tissue of that is our donors' generosity, who may have greater flexibility beyond an application process as well. And so we were pleased to lean into that. We're not done. It's a journey, have to acknowledge that. But at the root of it is trust and centering the voices of the organizations and those that you serve.
I think there's an element of trust-based philanthropy is a fad. There were 43 United Ways that got $25 million from Mackenzie Scott, which was fabulous. Trust-based, do what you want, do what you need to do, do your best work with these monies. But keep in mind that our sector, the primary funder of our sector, is public support. And I don't see government anytime soon saying, here's your $1 million, now you decide how you're going to spend it. So I think it's a fad in philanthropy, and it'll be great to learn from the Mackenzie Scott efforts across our sector how that played out, and hopefully really well, so that it'll inspire more trust-based philanthropy. But I think it's certainly unknown.
Can I just add that I think one of the reasons that's so important is that we often find ourselves betwixt and between funder priority and a changing potential community need. So I think in this environment we're talking about right now, the ability to navigate and pivot to what the community need is. And I'm not saying mission creep, that you're going to go out there and do all kinds of different things, but sometimes that need is more nuanced or more layered, or there's a particular target that we need in that moment that there may not be a funding source that's already ready to address it. So I think that this releases some of that tension that we find ourselves in as nonprofits to say, okay, well, compliance tells me I have to do this. The community is telling me they need me to do this. How do I bring those things? All the effort and time we spend trying to figure out how to make those two things match. On average, our grant writer can spend between 50 and 100 hours on a grant proposal. So that time being spent now trying to figure out how to better serve or address that community need, because we were able to make that transition and have that relationship with our funding partners, is going to be huge.
If I could briefly add, first, thank you. This is why I love my job so much. I have bosses like Miss Evans. Second, there have been unique efforts made of late through both the CARES Act dollars and the American Rescue Plan dollars to create more open-ended access to government funds, giving agencies flexibility to do the work they need to do. Interestingly, neither the CARES Act nor the American Rescue Plan Act set aside a penny for nonprofits. They created funds that states, counties, and cities had to administer, and they had to do it very quickly with the CARES Act, and they have a much longer runway with the American Rescue Plan Act. But for a very specific example, the city of Columbus is currently navigating a $5 million grant opportunity that is expressly for capacity building and intended to be as broadly applicable and available as possible. That eases burdens on nonprofits at a time when they need burdens eased so they can focus on the work that they're trying to do helping people.
Thank you. I know there are some examples of where philanthropy and nonprofits have partnered with government to determine where funds should go in communities. Not seeing that so much through the current ARPA funds, but there hopefully will still be opportunity for the government to look to nonprofits, because nonprofits are the ones who know the community, they know the needs for that opportunity. So with that, challenge of that long-term sustainability, because we know that even if some of those funds come into the communities now, what does that mean for the long term? And then as a kind of a part two in that, because I'm mindful of the time, I wanted to ask also about sustainability and the role of endowments and how nonprofits are looking at the long term in terms of their finances.
Really, really good question. The marketplace right now is showing a popularity of comprehensive campaigns, which would be inclusive of endowments. And I think as donors do have an understanding of the need for operating support, but also the importance of, call it a rainy day fund, we're seeing organizations often coming to the Columbus Foundation in pursuit of what endowment services could do to help their organization. Some organizations have chosen to open two funds with that mindset and that fiduciary model. One might be specific for capital improvement, and the board chooses to put in bequests that come to the organization that might not have been expected, best kind of gifts, and kind of out of sight, out of mind, and choose to put that into an endowment model to ensure that there is a stream and a thoughtful revenue opportunity for capital needs going forward. And then organizations are choosing to look at endowments in a more traditional mindset, especially knowing now the importance of rainy day funds for organizations. And then being able to have access to them either in larger tranches to truly help in a time of need, or to see it as a sustainable funding opportunity within that model. And so I think that over time, the compounding interest of investments speaks for itself. But I think also in this moment in time, the importance of thinking about a rainy day fund and the strength of what an endowment can do is both compelling for organization, leadership, boards, and donors.
I think it's well known that our community is under-endowed compared to our peer cities in Ohio that have older wealth, and at some point, Columbus will have its older wealth, but we don't have the endowments that Cleveland has, or Cincinnati, or Dayton, or Toledo, which are far more endowed than we are. Most important from my perspective is that we have a diverse funding pool, and we're not reliant on just one body of funding. So an endowment is an important resource in that. But I urge all of us to be as diverse in our portfolio as possible.
Briefly, on the government side of things, and that being a significant percentage of where nonprofit revenue comes from, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night most. Flat funding is a funding cut, especially right now. And we're not sure where funding levels will be at, especially out of the federal government and the state government. The budget fight that we had this time last year with the state Senate was very, very concerning, where there was a move to kneecap several subsectors of the health and human services sector. And we work cross sectors and with certain partners on both sides of the aisle in the state Senate to get those elements removed from the state budget. But that foreshadows challenges to come in terms of government funding streams, and we need to be ready for that instability.
Thank you. I could talk all afternoon here, but I'm being mindful of time. And so in just a little bit, we're going to move to questions from both the live stream, but also from you all in the audience. So if you have a question, please make your way to the microphone, which is on the side of the room. And if you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat before we take audience questions. So I have a final question for panelists. I actually had 3 more questions. I'm going to try to see if I can get it all in. Well, I want to be sure, we've talked a lot about the human services, and that is the greatest need, but we know that the nonprofit sector is incumbent of many types of organizations. So where you see the arts and humanities, health and environment, if there's any other examples that you want to lift up from those sectors as well. But I also want us to focus on systemic change. We know that it's in every sector currently, and that nonprofits are engaging in different ways, whether through policy and whether it's through advancing equity. I think our audience would love to hear, how are nonprofits engaging for systemic change, and how can they be a part of that?
Can I jump on the arts quickly? It just is a pin in the conversation, because they were, as a sector, not immune to this as well. And a report has actually shown that they have not experienced an adequate amount of governmental support. And the report that I'm referencing comes from the Center for Regional Development at Bowling Green State University, which is captured that the creative industry in the state has 18 billion in payroll and generates an economic impact of 55 billion across the state. And it saw a shrinking of 41,000 jobs, and the economic output declined by 8 billion. Of the arts organizations that we work with in Central Ohio, and there's more than 60 of them as formal grantees, the majority of them saw erosions to their budget, and in some cases, a pretty consistent number that we saw was 60% erosion to their budget. And we know that that trickles down to the talented professionals and performers and innovation. Deborah, that was one of your questions early on. How is the sector being innovative? And I really give a huge credit to our arts sector for thinking about venues differently, treating venues, whether it's HVAC, even differently, outreach to new audiences, and how do you engage those audiences differently, not only to start the pipeline of future patrons, but to ensure that they're not being left out of the important stimuli that comes from everything that we know of artistic input to our well-being and our sense of flourishing. And so Central Ohio not immune to that, and a big shout out to what the arts does do for our nonprofit sector as well. And the best example of that is when we have health and human service organizations, housing organizations intertwining and bringing the creativity through our artistic professionals as well.
I'll jump in and just share that I think one of the things that has been really important in systemic change is that it matters as much how we do something as what we do. And so even as a sector, as we look internally to how our staff, how we balance diversity, we were talking about succession and talent and how we engage and advance diversity internally, but then also how that actually gets delivered out in our community and what that looks like. So that may mean the vendors you choose, that may mean where we choose to work. We were talking on our call earlier this week, the nonprofit sector, we're an engine. We're thousands and thousands of employees and organizations strong. strong in our community and we have impact. So where we invest our money and how we partner with each other or with suppliers and hiring matters. And that's part of how we start to change. And of course, we balance spending our time on advocacy and working with our political and elected officials, as well as working with all of you to advance a message. I often tell people, part of my job is getting housing affordability to matter to people who don't need it. So that's our personal message for Homeport, but each one of us is advancing a message. And so how you engage with us is through asking these kind of conversations. We need broader input and interest in the work that we're doing because it matters to the people that we work with, but it has to also matter across our community. It has to matter that there are people who are homeless. It has to matter that there are third graders who can't read. It has to matter more broadly, and so that we actually can advance and have a systemic change and start to change the economic systems that we live within, change our zone. Shout out to City of Columbus for changing our zoning code. Does that seem like it matters? It matters a whole lot where you can build or where you can't build something. And so those are some of the things that give me hope and excitement that we're willing to start to engage in a conversation that doesn't perpetuate us being in a position where sometimes it feels like we're putting on Band-Aids, right? If sometimes we feel like we're addressing the same issues over and over again. I told you we're 35 years old this year. We did some digging and found some of our old records. And back in the late 80s when we were being founded, they were talking about a housing gap. And it was about the same size. It's about 53,000 households needed that they were talking about addressing then. So you imagine the size that we were in the late 80s and the size that we are now, how much that gap has grown. And so that made me start like, dang it, am I making any difference whatsoever? Is this what I've dedicated my life to? So it's like, it makes you ask yourself the question, like, why are we doing this? But then you see these moments and these innovations and these opportunities to engage differently and ask ourselves the different questions of, well, why is that happening? Why do we see these same outcomes over and over again? Okay, now let's start to change why that is, and then we can have a different story for our community.
This is off topic, but I am sitting here, first event really where we're all together again and looking at all these servant leaders in this room. It's remarkable. So thank you.
First, briefly to the arts, the Greater Columbus Arts Council and the organizations they serve have been tremendous partners the last 2 years. So Tom, wherever you are, thank you for your leadership and your partnership. Thank you, Tom. I'm really sorry I missed the Arts Festival this past weekend. Arts are going to be a key way in which we navigate all of the trauma that we've been through too. And a lot of our agencies understand that uniquely. One of my bosses in the room, Dwayne Casares from Directions for Youth and Families, has this wonderful arts program that helps serve kids and families. And a lot of our agencies understand that more than ever. So I just wanted to make sure I flagged those pieces. A limitation of health and human services nonprofits is that they can't flip a switch and make the systemic changes that they want and that they have wanted for decades. But they can certainly influence those that have that ability. And I have seen an incredible amount of attention to what nonprofit leaders across the sectors of nonprofits think needs to be changed in terms of systems. They're too busy doing the urgent work every day, but that also gives them unique insights into where systemic shifts have to happen, whether it's moving a mountain or moving a pebble. And I think we need to keep listening to these nonprofit leaders and follow through on what they're telling us we need to be doing. There are 5 areas where I hear a lot of our folks talking a lot that intertwine with, or you might think are on the periphery of what nonprofit leaders are worried about. But let me share these 2 briefly, if I may. You've heard a few of them before, but I want to reinforce: labor, workforce, automation, and now sustained inflation and economic challenges. That's a immediate challenge and a long-term one that we know is intertwined with systemic challenges and urgent ones too. Another is global warming. Our folks are deeply concerned about that. You see that happening in real time today. And the people our agencies serve and the agencies themselves are uniquely affected by global warming. We have a lot of work to do. The third is disinformation and misinformation. It's creating significant challenge for agencies. and even doing the little things of moving those little pebbles in the systemic work and meeting those urgent needs. And I will stop at those three. But I think we need to keep listening to our nonprofit leaders and keep following through on the work we need to do at all levels of government, at all decision-making levels in our community.
I see a regional approach in terms of that vision more so than I have before. And some of that's necessitated by the growth pressures that we're feeling as a region, but we're not just talking about it as transit from region. There's great effort with Link Us as an example, but Michael, you brought up global warming. We're also thinking about what for our region is the environmental sustainability plan, or through the new foundation of Rapid 5. How do we look at existing environmental assets and activate those for economic development or access to disconnected neighborhoods? Or the City of Columbus's urban forestry master plan, realizing that our tree canopy is diminishing at a really embarrassing rate. And the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. So those regional type conversations do intersect with all of the work that we're doing.
I want to be sure that we have time for our audience questions, as it is the longstanding tradition of the CMC. So Jane, I know that you may have questions from the live stream audience. And again, if you have something for our panelists, please make your way to the microphone. So what is the first question?
Wonderful. I do. And thank you so much. We do have a lot of questions, so I'll ask them quickly and you answer them quickly, and then we'll get done. Julie Donovan and actually a couple other people are talking about mergers and consolidation. Is there any organized effort to help nonprofits evaluate opportunities to consolidate services, consolidate organizations, share leadership?
No. Prior to the pandemic, there was about one health and human services nonprofit merger per year in town. During the pandemic, because of the generosity of this community across sectors, not one of those nonprofits had to close its doors so they could keep helping people. That will change as some of these challenges come to bear. And there are lots of conversations amongst organizations about how to partner, how to collaborate, how to affiliate, et cetera. But there is not currently a coordinated move to shutter nonprofits and put them all under one roof. There is an effort to work more closely together that we're working on, and we'll have more announcements later this year, but it is not about mergers, but it is about cost savings and working more effectively together. I have shared in my career, many of you have heard me, but at the Columbus Foundation, we had monies to help organizations merge, even study the feasibility of merging. And at United Way, we had those monies as well. You can't give that money away. Organizations don't want to merge.
And those dollars largely, to a degree, still exist at the Columbus Foundation, because we think of one of our promises is to help you with the most effective philanthropy as possible, and the efficiency at the organization level fits into that. And so earned revenue is really where these dollars are available, but because of some brilliance within the community and some donor interest, please reach out. Let's have the conversation if your organization is pursuing that out of necessity or strategic desire.
Hi, I'm Lucia Lynches from Ione, Ohio. Just a quick question. If you're a nonprofit sort of outside the realm of the traditional sort of, health and housing and so on and so forth, we're seeing huge need for mental health services, more LGBTQA+, et cetera, journalism as places are cutting back. What advice do you have for those kind of nonprofits who are trying to kind of fill that gap, but maybe are outside of a traditional, area?
If you're filling the bona fide need, then by all means, keep the foot on the accelerator. If you find that there are others in the space that you may be providing a redundant service or overlapping service, I think a conversation about what's in everybody's best interest certainly needs to be had. What I love about the Columbus Foundation and our family of donors, of individuals, corporations, families, is we end up funding everything A to Z arts to zoos and everything in between. And I'm even fond of a grant application opportunity that we have that is for English and literary education for private and preparatory schools. And we want to fill the donor's intent to make sure that that's taken care of for those institutions. And so if you're feeling that you may not fit into a specific segment, I would say largely the work that you're doing does fit one way or another, and it's worth finding those allies and those advocates to help you pursue that mission, and there may be funding for it.
Jane?
This is from Sherry Hubbard. Regarding staffing shortages, what appetite do nonprofits have for employing retirees? Many do not have requirements for insurance coverage or other benefits and bring years of experience and skills.
So that's a tough one. I think it gets back to what we're talking about. We're about retaining talent and having the right resources financially to support the work, the staff we want to have. It's not an easy answer, but I think some of the creativity that even Michael was talking about in terms of what kind of benefits you get from working for a nonprofit, what kind of opportunities do we offer besides, sometimes we don't have this as robust a retirement program. I honestly say there are for-profit developer peers of ours who do bonuses. We don't have the bonus structure. So what's the value of working at the organization? We have to lift that up. And you're right, we tried to find the best way to support those long-term employees and those retirees in the best ways that we can, but it's not an easy answer. And it probably looks different for every nonprofit based on their history and their size and their financial ability.
That's very well put. And I'll add two corollaries to that. One is that a lot of retirees in town have been in capacity for nonprofits for decades through volunteer capacity, board service, manual labor, et cetera. And one of the first cuts from nonprofit programming and operations were volunteer programs when the pandemic began, because older populations were and remain most vulnerable to COVID. That's beginning to bounce back a little bit more robustly than it had been previously. Second, where's my colleague Bhumika Patel? That's our Director of Membership and Community Engagement, and she is tremendous. And one of the things that we're working on is how do we harness the pool of retirees in our community and put them to work where they want to work and can be of support for nonprofits. And our retired CEOs in the sector are not immune from that. And quite frankly, we have several, some that might be here, and several that have volunteered and they want to be engaged and help. Hi, Margie. I see you, Margie Pizzuti. You're first on my list, you and King Stump. So there's a lot of conversation there. We just have to figure out how to build that infrastructure out and get the work done.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, but I do have one little question. I have to ask, where are you seeing promise and where are you finding hope?
I want to jump to our community. We're bringing the big table back in October. That's the big table. Clarifying that, the big table is coming back in October. And through those intentional community conversations that'll happen on October 6th, we are consistently inspired by neighbors, sense of community, people's approach to the big challenges that we're facing, the resolve, the resilience, and just the general desire, as we're experiencing today, of togetherness. And so we find hope in that, and that's just one day, yes, but my answer, Deborah, was community.
Thank you, Dan. I apologize, we don't have enough time. I'm getting the signal, but I know there is hope because I've had a chance to talk to these folks, and I hope you get a chance to talk to them as well, too. And I think the hope that we see in you being here today, we just thank you for that. And now I'd like to turn it over to Carrie for our concluding remarks.
All right, thank you very much. As we close this year's State of the Nonprofits, I'm grateful that we could come together and talk about where we are today, because if we know where we are, we're better equipped to get where we want to be. So thank you for coming. Please make plans to join us next Wednesday for a one-on-one interview with CEO of the Columbus Zoo, Tom Schmidt. And thank you to today's sponsors, the Columbus Foundation, Columbia Gas, Columbus Business First, Columbus Speech and Hearing Center, Kramer Associates, Crane Group, Huntington, The Ohio State University, and Schneider Downs. Thank you to our online virtual seat patrons, to the Emergency Response Fund and the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream partnership, and the Columbus Dispatch, and our special appreciation to today's speakers, Michael Corey, Lisa Courtice, Leah Evans, Dan Sharpe, and of course, Deborah Aubert Thomas. And thank you all for joining us. Be safe, be well, and we hope to see you soon.